al ruedo con informes sobre películas y series, que voy consiguiendo entrevistas, charlo con gente que ha trabajado en distintos proyectos. Por supuesto, si les gusta este tipo de cosas que hago, les agradecería que se suscriban al canal, que estén atentos a lo que voy subiendo. Esta vez vamos a hablar de la primera película ganadora del Oscar dentro de la categoría a Mejor Película Animada. Hablé con alguien que estuvo trabajando en la cocina de Shrek, fíjate, mirá de quién encontré.
Thought love was only true in fairy tales.
I can't remember exactly, but I guess it must have started around, I don't know, 1997 or something like that. You know, it was about 3 years or somewhere in there before the movie came out, or maybe even 4 or 5, because it took time even after my involvement just to render all of the animation and all that kind of stuff that was marketing. So I would say that, and then it was in progress and production some years before that. So it's like you know what we were discussing when we first started talking. It takes years for these things to happen, even when they go well.
Yeah.
And this didn't go well because you had a star who passed away.
Yeah.
So everything had to take a big turn. When I joined the crew to Shrek, Chris Farley had already recorded most of his dialogue. And if you look at his face, you can even see in his body how it's sort of patterned after Chris Farley. But it was mostly dramatic back then. It was light in its tone, but it was, in my estimation, pretty much a straightforward, dramatic fairy tale adventure. And I was kind of brought in to add jokes.
You definitely need some Tic Tacs or something, because your breath stinks.
You can't just add jokes to some things. You can't take something that's straight ahead drama and suddenly make it a comedy by adding jokes. It's not like baking a cake. You have to sort of reinvent this thing. And I ended up staying, I think, 2.5, 3 years, and the whole thing was almost completely rewritten. And the whole tone of the character had to change too, because you're talking about an actor like Chris Farley and an actor like Mike Myers. Yeah. They're completely different in their tone. And I'm pretty sure that it was Mike who wanted to add the accent to Shrek, because that's his background, that's what he comes from, and he can do it. And there was some pushback, I think, on the part of some executives who said, you know, this is essentially an American movie. Why would you make the star a foreigner? But somebody won that fight, and it became a big part of who he was.
Don't look down. Shrek, I'm looking down.
Donkey completely changed while I was there. I did a lot of the writing for Donkey, and I think, if anything, it was just a reaction to wanting to get someone who talks that much to shut up for a while. There are fairy tales that have people being struck dumb, you know, where they suddenly under a spell and they can't talk. That's not unusual. That's pretty common. There were characters in fairy tales who were struck blind or deaf. It's a pretty common sort of device. If you watch the original Disney version of Pinocchio, watching children turn into donkeys was not done for comedy. It was done for terror, for entertainment purposes, but also to admonish children that if they act like jackasses, they're going to end up a jackass. So I know that Donkey was definitely part of that sort of tradition, but I don't know if the being struck dumb kind of thing was connected directly to Pinocchio, and it was a long time ago, so it's possible, and I just don't remember.
DreamWorks Pictures invites you to a land of fairy tales.
Hey! Oh, no, dead girl, off the table!
Where are we supposed to put her? The bed's taken.
What?
We talked about every single fairy tale, you know, there ever was, that anybody could come up with. And it's just, it's so many moving parts that I don't know that you could ever really map where everything came from. But we knew the basic stuff we wanted to sort of make fun of, because it was the stuff that Disney did.
Yeah.
I mean, if you wanted to do the Red Shoes or the Ugly Duckling, you could, but you're really going to go for the low-hanging fruit first. You know, you're going to go for Cinderella, Snow White, Pinocchio, Robin Hood, you know, the stuff that hits as wide an audience as possible. So it's almost like if you can't think of it off the top of your head, then don't even bother. When it comes to that kind of satire, it doesn't take a lot of research because, especially in America, you're raised on these stories. And if you're a writer in animation, if you're an artist, you really know these stories, because they're the foundation of our mythology. And a lot of those fairy tales also have, there's a lot of repetition in them. There is a lot of allegory and symbolism that is common to a lot of those stories. There's girls in danger, there's brave knights, there's sleeping sickness, there's evil witches or stepmothers, there's poisoned fruit. All those things run in more than one fairy tale. Yeah. And I don't think it's a coincidence. It's because of the sort of psychological roots they all come from. They were all stories that were meant to sort of explain or comfort children and adults about why life was the way it was.
Rescues a fair princess.
You didn't slay the dragon?
It's on my to-do list.
From a nasty villain.
So it was deliberately like trying to laugh at Disney. Is that the thing? Or like the way that Disney built their stories?
Well, yes. I mean, I think you're better. I think it's better to put it the way you did the second time. It's not that we were trying to laugh at Disney per se, but Disney created a tradition of retelling fairy tales that has become part of culture. Yeah. And it wasn't that there was any person at Disney or that Walt Disney was someone that we wanted to make fun of. It was that when you have a target that is that big and you decide to go after it, it's because it's a gigantic target, and the heart of satire is to try to bring down anything that's big. Yeah. You don't make fun of things that don't have power. You make fun of things that have the most power. Yeah. That's the purpose of satire and lampooning. So we knew we weren't going to hurt Disney. It wasn't about that. It was getting people to laugh because we were all raised on this stuff that we assume is the way it's always done. And if you try doing it a different way by pointing at the stuff that's always been done and making fun of the tradition, it's very refreshing and very entertaining. And if anything, I think the tradition that Shrek started has itself become a monster.
Weren't you afraid of the consequences with Disney? Like maybe, I don't know if they were going to sue you, but maybe they could like try to destroy you in any ways.
Well, I don't think that that's a silly thing to ask. It's like now looking back, you would feel, oh, come on, that's not going to happen, because it didn't happen. But we didn't know. And now speaking personally, I didn't have any problem with it because I was a writer. I think the people who really were worried were higher up. And at that time, in Dreamworks animation history, they were trying a very different kind of movie. They were doing big, serious, dramatic epics that I think most people don't even, frankly, remember. Things like Spirit and Prince of Egypt. And they were beautiful films, and they were entertaining and educational, but they didn't catch fire the way that I think they wanted them to. Yeah. And Shrek was kind of an attempt to, like you said earlier on, I don't know if it literally was going to save the company. That's about finances, and I don't know anything about that. But I know that creatively, it was a reaction to all of that. Yeah. A lot of really big, serious epics had been made. They didn't seem to be gaining, I think, the traction that they wanted, and they said, what the hell? See what happens if we try this. Yeah. And I think that it was, if it weren't for those movies, I don't think Shrek ever would have happened, and I think probably high up there were some people sweating. I'm sure there were lawyers around back then who were saying, you guys really have to do this? I mean, you're taking a pea shooter and you're going into the jungle and aiming at a leopard. I mean, if they want to make trouble for you, they will.
One name spells action.
You're not exactly what I expected.
It wasn't difficult to do because it's one of those few things that was not only correct creatively, but it was correct politically. If we wanted to make a really weak female character, which was more traditional, it actually, I think, would have been more difficult because at that time, it just wasn't being tolerated anymore. It was easy to go far in that direction to a point of, absurdity. I think, if anything, the problem wasn't making Fiona too strong. It was making sure that Shrek never ended up looking so foolish as to sort of generate contempt or disrespect as a character. So it was their relationship that was the delicate thing, not really Fiona's character. That was just pure 100% fun.
Hasta ahí el informe de Shrek. Les recomiendo, si tienen ganas de ver algo, por ejemplo, pueden ver el documental de Friends en el que trabajé, o por ejemplo ver cómo se trabaja en los efectos especiales y en las tomas de riesgo dentro del universo cinematográfico de Marvel. Nosotros por lo pronto nos vemos en el próximo informe aquí de Mirada a quien encontré.